If you thought California rents only go one direction, that story just changed. Across the state right now, rents are quietly sliding, and in some cities, they're dropping faster than most people expected. Every major data set is saying the same thing. Rents are down year over year, listings are sitting longer, and landlords are negotiating again. Here's what's different this time. This isn't just one city, it's happening all over the state. And that matters because when this kind of shift spreads across multiple markets at once, it usually means something bigger is changing underneath the surface. So where is it hitting the hardest? Start with Santa Clarita. This was supposed to be the escape from LA. During the pandemic, this area exploded. Families moved in, developers rushed to build, and demand looked unstoppable. It had the schools, the space, and the suburban feel people wanted when remote work made the commute seem optional. Now the reversal is showing up. Vacancies are climbing, and rents, especially in newer buildings, have dropped sharply from their 2022 highs. The problem is, the demand story changed. Remote work didn't stick the way people expected. Commuting came back, even if it's only a few days a week, and that drive to LA got old again. What felt manageable when people were settling in has started to feel like a trade-off again. At the same time, new units kept hitting the market. That's why you're seeing concessions again. Free rent, lower deposits, deals that disappeared for years. And once those incentives come back, it usually means landlords are no longer pricing from strength. They're trying to keep units occupied, and this pattern doesn't stop there. It gets bigger. Take Sacramento. Between 2020 and 2022, rent surged as Bay Area workers flooded in. Developers saw that demand and built aggressively, assuming the influx would last longer than it did. Now, just a couple years later, vacancies are up, rents are down, and those new downtown buildings are offering serious incentives just to fill units. Some of those renters went back to the Bay, others left California entirely. The demand spike was temporary, the supply isn't, and that's the part that keeps putting pressure on the market. Once those buildings are delivered, they don't disappear when demand cools. They stay there competing for the same renters month after month. Now shift to the coast. Long Beach, this used to be the affordable beach city. Not cheap, but within reach. That's changing. Vacancies are rising, rents are easing, and landlords who used to have wait lists are now competing for tenants. Here's the part most people miss. At the same time rents are dropping, landlord costs are going up, insurance, maintenance, utilities, it's all higher. So you've got a squeeze. Higher expenses, weaker rents. That's a tough combination, especially for smaller owners who don't have the same cushion as bigger operators. For some of them, the math is starting to break. And that's pushing some owners to step back or sell. Now layer on something else. Oakland shows what happens when demand drops and perception shifts at the same time. Vacancies have jumped in some areas, and rents, especially for newer high-end units, have taken a noticeable hit. These buildings were built for commuters heading into San Francisco. That pipeline shrank. Tech layoffs reduced high-income renters. Remote work reduced daily commuting. And safety concerns in certain areas have influenced where people choose to live. So now those same buildings are competing hard, cutting rents and offering incentives just to stabilize. And when that happens in a market like Oakland, it tends to spill over into how people view the entire area. Even renters who aren't directly affected start to notice that the balance has shifted. And right next door, you see the same pressure at a much larger scale. Los Angeles. For years, LA looked almost untouchable. Rents kept rising, demand stayed strong, vacancies stayed tight. That's changed. Rents are down across much of the county, and vacancies are creeping up, especially in newer multifamily buildings. The driver is simple: fewer renters. Since 2020, hundreds of thousands of people have left LA County. At the same time, construction didn't slow down. More units, fewer renters. That's why incentives are back in parts of LA that haven't needed them in years. And when a market as large as LA starts to soften, it sends a signal. It tells you this isn't just a small local adjustment. Now, you might expect coastal markets to hold up better. San Diego should be one of the most resilient markets in the state. And even here, cracks are showing. Rents have eased, vacancies are higher than their pandemic lows, and renters have more options than they've had in years. In places like downtown and Pacific Beach, landlords are competing again. A wave of new luxury units hit the market expecting strong demand. Instead, affordability limits started to bite. So even brand new buildings are offering deals just to stay competitive. That's a pretty clear sign that demand isn't gone, but it's no longer unlimited. Renters are getting more selective, and they have more leverage than they did a couple of years ago. And then you get to where this really shows up. San Francisco. This market saw one of the sharpest corrections early in the pandemic, and while rents bounced back, they never fully recovered. They're still below peak levels, and vacancies remain elevated compared to historical norms. Downtown tells the story. Fewer office workers, less foot traffic, and more housing supply coming online at the same time. That combination changed the renter profile completely. For the first time in years, some middle-income renters can actually consider living here again. That doesn't mean San Francisco has turned cheap. It hasn't. But it does mean the market is operating differently than it did before. The old assumptions about constant pressure on rents no longer hold the same way. Now head inland. Riverside was the release valve for Southern California pricing. When coastal markets got too expensive, people moved here. That drove a surge in both demand and construction. Now that wave is reversing. Vacancies are up, rents are down, and demand has cooled across much of the region. And there's another factor here. Jobs. The Inland Empire depends heavily on logistics and warehousing. As that sector cooled from its peak, it pulled rental demand down with it. So instead of a fast-growing market, you've got one that's leveling off, with more supply than it needs right now. Then there's San Jose. San Jose is simpler. When tech slows down, this market feels it. Rents are down significantly from their peak. Vacancies are higher, and high-end units are facing the most pressure. Layoffs reduced demand. Remote work gave people flexibility to leave. And developers built, assuming that growth would continue. Now those same units are competing for a smaller pool of renters. In some cases, rents are quietly being cut by hundreds per month just to keep units filled. That's not the kind of move you make when demand is strong. It's what happens when landlords know they need to get more aggressive to stay occupied. And then there's one more city that really stands out. Bakersfield. This is where it gets surprising. Bakersfield has always been the fallback option, the place people go when everything else gets too expensive. But even here, things are shifting. Vacancies have climbed into double digits in some reports, and rents are dropping year over year. That's unusual for a market that's typically more stable. Developers built expecting continued migration from higher-cost areas. But that migration slowed, and in some cases reversed. At the same time, local industries like agriculture, energy, and logistics have all faced pressure. So now even Bakersfield is dealing with excess supply. And when your most affordable major market starts to soften, that tells you something bigger is happening. Step back and look at the bigger picture. This isn't one city. It's not one region. It's a statewide shift. You've got three forces hitting at the same time. A wave of new construction delivering units right now. Slower population growth, and in some places outright decline. And a hard ceiling on what renters can actually afford. Put that together, and you get exactly what's happening right now. More listings, longer vacancy times, and landlords competing again. Not a crash everywhere, but a clear reset. And for the first time in years, renters finally have some leverage. That changes the conversation for everyone. For renters, it means more options. For renters, it means more options and more room to negotiate. For landlords, it means pricing has to be sharper, concessions matter again, and empty units cost more than they used to. So now I'm curious, what city are you in, and are you actually seeing rents drop? Or is your area still holding the line?